Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pokemon Trainer Evan YouTube channel. I'm your host, Evan Davies. Thank you for rejoining me here. We are going to revisit my custom Pokemon or Fakemon region, whichever term you want to use, right in this video with some brand new Pokemon to show you. So I'm going to take you back and welcome you back to the Halzari region. So for a quick review of last week's video, the Halzari region is very much based off of the United States and my experiences traveling the country and some of the things that the theming and sentiments that the country kind of has at large. And a lot of what if questions come from those ideals and those themes that I was trying to touch on. Now, last time on our regional visit, we met our three traditional starters. Our grass starter, Turfalo, on the left. The center is Cardamber, our fire Pokemon, and on the right is Delphin, our water starter. So those three traditional starters were all introduced last week, and if you missed that, please go back and check it out and go into great depth to check those out and tell you all about those three starters. But last time I also left you with this. The classic tease. I even brought it back to the old anime by asking, who's that Pokemon? Well, I'm going to answer that question right here and now and introduce you to some brand new Pokemon friends. That Pokemon right there goes by the name of Fluflutter. Fluflutter is a bug type. Although it is not my Route 1 bug, it is quite common throughout the entire region. Fluflutter I based off of a common gnat or lake fly. Growing up in the Midwest, being utterly surrounded by water with lakes and rivers pretty much everywhere, you are constantly surrounded by gnats, lake flies, flies of some kind. You know, there's a lot of insects. Where there's water, there's insects pretty much. And that is something I thought I could use as inspiration for Fluflutter, which is why it's got a little hint of a mosquito, it's got a hint of a gnat, it's got a hint of a lake fly in there. It's an amalgamation of a lot of bugs that I grew up near, and something I want to touch on. Now, going to its Pokedex entry, Fluflutter is the gnat Pokemon. It is a bug type with the Halzari Pokédex number 123. A common sight in the fields and woodlands of Halzari, Fluflutter swarms are great pollen transporters. So that's another facet to this bug type Pokemon Fluflutter. Fluflutter is based in a area of my region that is notorious for farms, which, if you know anything about the great state of Wisconsin and the Midwest, there's a lot of farming that goes around there, and that is, something near and dear to my heart. So I thought this would be fitting to put this Pokemon near a very large farming region or farming area inside of the Halzari region. So although it's common across the entire region, you can find very concentrated swarms of it in this specific farming and cultivation regional area. Now, Fluflutter, I named it the gnat Pokemon. It's incredibly tiny, which is why I wanted to include in the description the idea of a swarm. A gnat is so small and defenseless that it can't do much on its own. However, in a swarm, it can be utterly obnoxious. I grew up a soccer player, and the county park that we played almost all of our games at was surrounded by water. And it was very common while you were running up and down the field to have a swarm of 400 to 500 gnats around your head at all times. It was even worse if you were me, because I was the goalkeeper most of the time, and you would be constantly swarmed by these gnats, just flying over your head, not doing anything. They're just swarming over you. They're not stinging you. They're not prodding or poking at you. They're just around you, buzzing around, being obnoxious. But they're so small you can't like what are you supposed to do? And that's kind of what I wanted the idea of Flu Flutter to be. Is that it's small, it's incredibly useful for the ecosystem, especially in the Halzari region. You know, being useful in the pollination process. Sorry, quick pause. The cardinal that I saw last week while introducing cardinal birds, literally right outside my window again. So it's just funny that he keeps appearing, or she. I don't know what the pronouns are of that bird. Continues to visit every time I record these videos, which I find pretty funny. But going back, Flu Flutter is, you know, is super useful to the ecosystem because it's a pollinator Pokemon. A gnat or a lake fly, although they're not great pollinators, they are incredible sources of food for so many really, really necessary parts of the ecosystem that, you know, everyone's like, oh God, I wish I could just get rid of them. You know, there's a term, at least in my home state or around, especially my hometown, it's lake fly season, where just for a couple weeks of every summer, you're just swarmed by lake flies. It's really not that big a deal, but it could sound pretty bad. But that 2 or 3 week period feeds a lot of really necessary parts of our ecosystem. So I thought Flu Flutter would be an interesting way to, explore that idea. And Flu Flutter does have an evolution. The first evolution ever introduced in the Halzari region to the public. It evolves into Flulidin. Flulidin, as you can see in the corner, is a bug and fighting type. It's got a far different energy than Flu Flutter. And I will touch on that with its Pokedex entry. Flulidin is the dutiful gnat Pokemon. Bug and fighting type. It is number 124 in the Halzari Pokedex. Using its spunky attitude, Flulidin watches over the lands it calls home. The careless are bound to be injured if they damage its habitat. Now, Flulidin, I hope through some of the art comes through that it does have a fun or spunky nature to it. But if you are careless or reckless or just straight up rude and want to destroy a habitat or the vegetation near Flulidin, it's going to mess you up. The last piece of the name is inspired by the word paladin. And that classic paladin character mold, it responds to ideas of duty and the ideas of protection. Flulidin is all about protecting the habitat near it and protecting the Pokemon in its team, protecting smaller Pokemon such as Flu Flutter, and just being very dutiful to what it is, which is why it's a common sight in the cultivation heavy regions of Halzari, because you got to protect crops, you got to protect your product, so to speak, and Flulidin is going to do that and help tremendously in that nature, which is why I included that fighting type, where yes, it's bug type still, it still has some of the weaknesses of a bug, but the fighting type neutralizes a few of those issues, which I thought would be a very interesting concept to touch on. However, Flulidin is not the lone evolution here. We've got another evolution to touch on, and that evolution is known as Clawflu. Clawflu, as you can see in the corner, bug and steel type. Very different vibe and a very different aspect to the Flu Flutter line. Clawflu is the picking Pokemon. It is bug and steel type with the Halzari Pokedex number 125. Its metal claw swings from its body with great dexterity. Due to this unique feature, it is common on crop farms in Halzari. This one is a very interesting one for me, and one that I really wanted to explore the idea of a concept. I love the idea of bugs and evolution and how that's truly, or how they grow. That's truly the inspiration behind the entire Pokemon franchise. Bug collecting was the inspiration to the entire franchise. So I wanted to use that and respect the bug type a little bit more. On top of that, I really wanted to, from time to time, challenge myself to what could I do with this? What could I do with that? So, in some of my videos I've mentioned before, I work in childcare. And the place I work at currently has a few of the classic claw style machines, in which claw games where you can pick up prizes or pick up candy with a claw, and that was really the inspiration behind Claw Flu. And it's got that dangling arm that's never quite useful for picking something out of a machine, but it's great for making money for other people. The idea of the claw was something I looked at while at work, and I was just like, oh my god, that's perfect for a Pokemon. And I can't believe it's never been used in the main franchise before. I thought it'd be a really interesting way to play with, Flutter, which is a gnat, because it could defend itself in a completely different way here with that steel typing, and it gains a completely new skill and new body type, where Flulidin very much becomes a classic fighter or a knight. Clawflu is just this goofball floating around picking stuff, which is why it's really common on farms, because it'll pick berries, it'll pick other crops, it'll pick up Pokemon if it needs to. It is big enough to do that for some Pokemon, and it can defend itself and defend the places that it is quite well, actually. But really, it's just a big old goofball, because I remember watching that claw machine at work, and it would just, especially one had just broken a couple months back, and it was just dangling, and the cord in between, attaching, that goes in between the coil and the claw and to the top mechanism would just vibrate uncontrollably for a little bit. And I just thought that'd be really interesting, especially I could see it as an animation in a Pokemon game, and I was like, that's a really unique, interesting way to do that. So Clawflu is a very different vibe, but still has some of those protective traits and the evolution of being able to defend itself far more than a Flutter. However, Flulidin and Clawflu have one more Pokemon to deal with, and that is Flugon. Flugon, little bit different, a bug and dragon type. To my knowledge, I'm going through my national Pokedex in my head. I don't know if there's ever been a bug dragon type, and if I am mistaken, I am very sorry on that. But Flugon is a bug dragon type that really goes to a challenge that I had in mind that I'll touch on right after its Pokedex entry. Flugon is the Dragon Gnat Pokemon, a bug and dragon type, number 126 in the Halzari Pokedex. The fiery temper it possesses can make it a challenge to train. Flugon looks to devour nearby vegetation and challengers alike. Now, Flugon really touches on a challenge I had for myself, which was a couple years back when I really started to get into the development of each Pokemon and drawing each Pokemon and thinking of the concepts behind them. I wanted to look at types and what types aren't really touched on. And to me, especially now that there's over 1,000 Pokemon that are officially in the Pokedex, it's crazy that there are some type combinations that still have not been done. And I get it, not all of them make sense, but it's the world of Pokemon. Everything can make sense if you do a good job with it. And Bug Dragon was just such a unique thing, because bugs, especially as they've been represented in Pokemon, are typically some of the least effective or weakest Pokemon in the entire ecosystem, the entire food chain, really. When you watch those first seasons of the anime, or you're going down Route 1 of each game, and you catch that first bug, you're like, oh, I got a new Pokemon. And within 10 seconds, if you can catch another Pokemon, you normally don't care, frankly. Or if you do care, it's to fill out your Pokedex, and shortly, once you hit 7 Pokemon, usually the first to go is that bug. So I thought that concept of of a bug that is very weak, that is, quick to go into the box or quick to be disregarded, would go really well with Fluflutter. And then an evolution, which is the dragon type, which is, kind of viewed as the king type. The vast majority of really powerful Pokemon have some sort of dragon to them. Or dragon Pokemon, there aren't a lot of weak dragon types. And I thought that concept and that combination would be so cool to explore, which is why I went with this very unique look of a dragon style head and a few dragon features, but really hit the insect and bug sections of it really well. So it keeps similar shape, but it gets a far fiery temper, and it takes on the anger of a gnat that's defenseless with the anger of a dragon that likes to destroy stuff. That was really some of the thought process behind its design. And I wanted to touch on that theming of emotion and the idea that when you act solely out of emotion, specifically negative emotion, things can go really bad really quickly. So, which is why it'll devour its vegetation and it'll devour a challenger if it can. It will attack, and which is different. Flulidin, it might give you a second, but if you're continually destroying something, it's going to protect what's there. Flugon, it sees you, it's attacking you because you're in its turf and it's its turf. So get out. There isn't a lot of waiting game there. So it has those typical angry traits, which would be such a unique and fun thing to deal with as a trainer in a game. Probably not in real life if you had to deal with it, but a very fun and unique Pokemon typing. Now, to get to these 3 evolutions, there's a bit of a unique way. If you heard some of my videos in the past, I'm a big Gen 2 fan, and I think you'll notice that if you pay attention to the details in this next image, Fluflutter evolves into all 3 of these separately. Its traditional evolution is Flulidin, which is why I introduced that one first. Once it is level 22 and has a fighting type move, you're good to go. It's evolving into a Flulidin. However, if you supersede and enter with a metal coat, you're getting a Clawflu. And if you intervene and give Fluflutter a dragon scale, it's going straight into Flugon. And I thought that'd be a really unique way for evolutionary items. Flulidin has a serious nature, and it's pretty obedient Pokemon-wise. Clawflu is just this weird, goofy thing that's floating around, buzzing around. And I thought that'd be a unique way to touch on a metal coat in which, steel typing very much evokes the future, humanity, how we intervene in nature, how we build things. And our intervention in this natural species creates this goofball Pokemon of Clawflu. On the other hand, when we intervene and give a dragon scale to this, almost hapless, almost defenseless Fluflutter, it becomes a raging dragon Flugon, which is a very unique way of doing things, which I thought was give a little bit more thought into evolutionary items than some Pokemon get, especially some of the Gen 4 Pokemon. It drives me crazy. It's like, well, you need an item for that. You're like, okay, why? Well, you need an item. And there's not a lot of thought process put into why, which I thought it'd be unique to reflect in their characters and into the general idea of the Pokemon themselves. So that is how you evolve Fluflutter to one of these 3 evolutions. Is, level 22 fighting type move, a Metal Claw, or a Dragon Scale. All can get you a different Pokemon. And thus far, we are now up to 7 Pokemon introduced in the Halzari region. However, I'm going to do it to you again. I'm going to ask you, who's that Pokemon? Now, something, I don't know if it's going to give a hint to this. I hope the shape does, though. If you've heard my past video and even the start of this video, you've heard me say traditional starters. Traditional starters. I might have something a little bit for you. A little bit different. And I'm going to leave you with that tease for next time when we visit the Halzari region. However, as always, I'd like to say thank you for joining me for this video and for watching. Honestly, this is a huge personal journey for me, sharing all this art. For the longest time, I did not really consider myself much of an artist. It was something that was kind of hard to grasp, really. I've always been interested in it. I've always doodled and done some drawings, but it was kind of hard to get into the mold of doing art every single day and now sharing it with the general public. That's somewhat scary, but also exciting. So thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate that so much. If favor I can always ask, if you can give me a like, give me a subscribe if you can, and leave a comment. I want to know your thoughts on these Pokemon. Give me ideas of what you're thinking about these Pokemon. I love hearing it. Someone shared a comment about a Delphin evolution in the past on our past video, and it got me thinking about some new Pokemon and some new different ways to approach it. So please share your thoughts, like this video if you can, subscribe, and share it with your friends who may be interested if you can. As well, you can find me on TikTok, Switch, Instagram. It's all Pokemon Trainer Evan. It's very easy to find. I always greatly appreciate you guys coming to check out my content. But as always, I will say thank you once again. I will catch you on the flip side. Thank you.